Thank you, Jake, and welcome everyone. I guess we're experiencing the hiccups of the new normal as we do this webinar. Congratulations on being one of the 100 people that get to do this live, since that's the limit on the Zoom right now. Apologies to everyone who's watching this as a recording. But welcome everyone. Obviously, when we initially set out to do this panel, it was for the NASPA annual conference, and we were planning to do it live, and it was going to be about a new white paper that NASPA and Inside Track and some others had put together on why it was important for student affairs to be more inclusive of online learners. So we did not intend for it to be as prescient as it is, but obviously in the last few weeks, I think most higher education students have become online learners, most of them unwillingly. And we're also in a situation where student affairs professionals are being simultaneously thrust into the world of remote work and remote student support without the resources or the time to do it properly. So we're shifting gears a little bit here. And fortunately, we've got a great panel with a great deal of expertise on these topics that we can tap into for today. But I'd also like to encourage all of you that are here, since we're on Zoom and we can unmute and chat and so forth, to please chime in, because we can all learn from each other around this issue. The final note I'll make before I introduce the panelists is that some of them will be talking about services or solutions that they've been using as they make this move online. And they asked me to share. These are not endorsements of any particular company or product. They're just trying to be as honest as they can about how they're coping with the current situation. So with that, I'd love to introduce our panelists. So first we have Allie Goldstein. Why don't you wave, Allie, just so folks can see you there. Allie is an assistant professor for the higher education program offered through Penn State's World Campus. Her research, which focuses on online education, examines how predominantly residential institutions can create engagement opportunities and affinity building activities for their online students. So we're very fortunate to have Allie here. Next, we have MJ Bishop. You may recognize her from such things as owning the Zoom we are all on now. She is the Associate Vice Chancellor and Director of University System of Maryland's Kirwan Center for Academic Innovation. That was established in 2013 to leverage the power of multi-institutional collaboration to increase access, affordability, and achievement for Maryland students. Previously, she was an associate professor at Lehigh University, where she taught instructional design and explored the role of technology in teaching and learning. So a lot of great insights from MJ to come. Next, we have Jane Dané. And Jane, give you a wave there. Jane's at Old Dominion. She's the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management. And she was the 2019 recipient of Outstanding Enrollment Management Professional from NASPA's Knowledge Community. At the state level, Jane is collaborating to promote degree completion through her leadership of the Online Virginia Network Authority Board. So great to have her here. Next up, we have Stephanie Gordon from NASPA. I'm sure you all know Stephanie. She's Vice President for Professional Development at NASPA and has been there for 17 years, leading professional development and engagement efforts for the organization. She's a former student affairs educator and professional herself, having worked at small colleges in residential life, admissions, financial aid, and first-year experience programs. And then last but not least, Saskia Knight. Say hello, Saskia. She's the Executive Vice Chancellor for Enrollment and Student Affairs at Brandman University, part of the Chapman University system. And with the creation of Brandman University, she developed and implemented many best practices for supporting students who are working full-time and getting them to graduation, a coaching center to manage prospective students through matriculation, and a dual advising model, which was recognized by the Department of Education as a best practice, as well as a one-stop student services team to support students with their finances. So a big thank you to all of our panelists for making time today. And as I mentioned, we're going to try and keep this conversational, so I do have some questions I'm going to direct to each of our panelists. but definitely as thoughts or questions come to you, please throw them in the chat, and we will get to those as we can. So first off, Saskia, I wanted to start with you because Brandman University obviously has been involved in online learning since the beginning, but you've also had 24 campuses or so spread across the West, including military bases that you've had to convert to online learning recently. And I'm just wondering, what are you seeing in terms of the difference between, shall we say, your voluntary and involuntary online learners, those forced and those who chose online learning?
Well, hi, Dave. We are definitely seeing some differences, but first let me give some context. All of our campuses, whether they go fully online or on ground, the on-ground version is a blended format, so that means they get 3 hours face-to-face, and then the rest of their learning is online. So all of our students have some experience with that technology, even though as adult learners, they are a little bit more nervous about adapting to the technology. Over the years, about 85% of our learning now is in a online modality. Some of the things that we've seen over the last month as we've transitioned our students, all of our students and our faculty to fully online, is the need for connectivity. We've got a fairly aggressive model for our student contact, so we use an intrusive advising model. But even with that, our students are demanding more regular contact. It might be the only phone call they're getting for that day. We're finding that the conversations we're having are a little bit more complicated. We've come up with some best practices like hosting virtual office hours. So our campuses might have at noon an open Zoom session where students can congregate with each other and also with our staff. We're creating different ways that we can communicate using newsletters. We're also making sure that for our students who sometimes, they're dealing with homeschooling their children now, they're dealing with technology issues just like we were. They're oftentimes sharing a computer amongst those in their family. So all of those challenges, we're trying to help our students with resources and training through the process. We're finding that students who are kind of involuntarily shifted, the courses that are more challenging for students, like our more intensive math courses, some of our practicum courses in social work, marriage and family therapy, education, those courses are a little bit more difficult in that transition. So we're spending extra time making sure students are getting comfortable and confident. I also want to highlight that this has also been stressful for our faculty. As our students are more demanding in terms of just the contact and the support. If you're a faculty member with 30, 25, 30, 35 students in your Zoom class or on Blackboard, it's going to be a lot of pressure on you as well. So just making sure that everyone is open, making sure that we're supporting our students, we're doing regular reach outs, and then across our distributed system, we have a daily check-in where we're sharing best practices with one another and making sure that we're staying connected.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Saskia. And Jane, you oversee enrollment management for both ODU's online and ground programs, but your student population is a little different. Most of yours are coming straight out of high school. So can you talk a little bit about the impact you're seeing moving online play for those students, especially those who, if they're lucky enough to have a home to go back to, that may be far away from campus?
Sure, Dave, glad to. Old Dominion has about 24,000 students, and approximately 6,000 of those are fully online. So we did have 3/4 of our students that were disrupted majorly in the last few weeks. Just like all of you, we focused on the urgency of moving students from the residence halls back home and trying to communicate in an effective way with the students and the families. And it seemed like every time we would have one message, that would change as circumstances seemed to interfere even more greatly. We do have a diverse learning population within ODU, the military affiliated, as well as diversity in race, ethnicity, first gen, and so forth. But if we really think about the traditional student that's been impacted in this last change, I thought I could paint a little bit of a picture that some of you probably already know the canvas for. And that would be the student who moves home. Their room may not be recognizable because it's inhabited by a sibling, or perhaps has been retrofitted in another way. The empty nest might have been disrupted, so the connection now with the family, with everyone close together, competing for devices, and also taking on chores and a little bit more pressure that they might have at home. Particularly the first generation student whose family may not know how much time they need to invest in school. So as we think about the setting, they're almost taking on the likeness of a non-traditional student in balancing work and home and so forth. One of the things we did at Old Dominion University to help with the communication process during all this disruption was to stand up a call contact center. And we've used this in our student engagement enrollment services area before in times of hurricanes or snowstorms in particular. It's a volunteer group who are very versatile in knowledge about the institution, being able to listen to families and students as they encounter challenges. So we were really fortunate to have our team come together for the past 3 weeks. Well, the first week was when our students were on spring break, as our faculty were gearing up to be able to offer the online options. But this call center was there as a sounding board for our students to be able to hear what challenges they were facing, whether it was difficulty in collecting their belongings from the residence hall, or whether it might be inability to find a hotspot or internet connections and so forth. So between the contacts that we were taking from the families and hearing what the problems were, we were able to translate that into frequently asked questions and other ways to support our students. The benefits of that were just so great. We received many compliments from our families. We also communicated everything to our parents as we had sent to students, and they began to trust the university and their involvement in that process. The amount of alerts, emails, texts, and all that can certainly be confusing as we're making our way in the new world. So I just wanted to highlight that in particular. A couple of other things that we do that relate to student affairs and some of the work that everyone does here in NASPA might be able to relate to the need for resiliency and coping skills, because if you may have read the recent article by David Kessler that talked about the COVID-19 as a process that really resembles grief stages that are important for everyone to understand what our students and families are going through, and our universities as well. So I just thought I'd point that out. It was in the Harvard Business Review, and it was really a helpful piece for everyone to connect with. Our Director of Counseling Services at Old Dominion, Nancy Badger, has a program called Monarchs Bounce Back, and this is no better time to be able to connect students with the skills that are needed for them to be able to push through and get to the other side of what challenges we're facing this semester. So we thought that our sprint within a marathon was over as we all settled into our work, but we're noticing that a number of students are not engaging in their Blackboard learning LMS, and we're now grabbing those students, not grabbing them literally, sorry, catching those students and contacting them to make sure that they have what's needed to be able to visit with their classroom and take care of their assignments. So that's through our student success coaching, and we're actually expanding our student success coaching program with another 10 individuals who were typically in our housing and residence life area, and they're now available to be able to make sure that we're making strong connections with the freshmen and sophomores, and particularly students that are at risk. So I just wanted to share a few of those things that we were doing here at Old Dominion that kind of fit with supporting the traditional student as they return to their homes.
Thank you, Jane, for that, and particularly helpful to hear how resources are getting reallocated to new purposes. MJ, I know you had some thoughts on this as well, just looking at it from a system level of very diverse institutions and student bodies.
Yeah, well, and I guess I kind of wanted to just kick into, I think we've been seeing some of this in the Chronicle and inside higher ed, but I think we really need to be careful about making a distinction between online education and what we're doing now, which I would characterize as remote teaching. You know, and I know Allie does a lot of research in this area, and my colleagues who do a lot of the online education, Saskia and Jane, you know, online education, we build in, we have time to plan, for starters. We have time to think about the instructional design of these things. We think hard about who our learners are, and then we build in the kinds of support and engagement that we need in order to make this work. I don't know how it was for all of you, but our first message out to faculty after it became clear that we were going to need to start sending students home was, hey, you know, if you're new to remote teaching, it doesn't have to be that hard. We can set you up with some synchronous tools and get you going quickly. Recognizing that we needed the faculty to feel comfortable and confident about what they were doing, and then that we could backfill with, you know, faculty, we want you to do what you can to communicate as much as possible with students. We need to be clear about what your expectations are. We need to think hard about what really matters this semester in terms of learning outcomes, and focus just on those things, and not get all uptight about all those little favorite assignments that you have. Let's just get the job done for this year. But as we're starting to think about now looking into the summer and the fall semesters, I think we're going to need to start getting serious about making this transition into what I would characterize as online education. So it'll be interesting to see how we're able to begin working. And I think it's going to involve working a lot more closely with our student affairs colleagues in order to make that happen and to be effective at it. So anyway, I wanted to make sure we were making that distinction and not characterizing this as online education.
An excellent point and a great reminder for everyone. Speaking of great reminders, Stephanie, you, in the paper I mentioned at the top of the hour, you had actually commented on the equity issues that are at play when in supporting online learners. And, you know, obviously with everything that's going on now, I think the equity issues are coming much more to the forefront. And I'm just curious if you can talk about a few of the new equity issues that are being triggered by this mass migration online.
Sure. Well, I think as we think about educational equity, in particular for online learning, we know that that there are challenges with this, with folks, for either older adults who aren't used to learning online, diverse populations who either don't have the internet speed, don't have a place to do their homework, do those pieces that need to be online, and this is only exacerbated in this situation. And the COVID-19, as MJ said, it is remote learning now, and it's not only just remote learning, it's this idea of the privilege that it is for folks to be quote unquote social distancing or shelter in place. Some folks are housing insecure. Some folks live in an environment where there isn't there aren't multiple rooms where one can go into another space to be able to learn and to be able to have that quiet space. You know, we all know that there's kids and dogs and cats and all kinds of things going on in people's lives right now, but that's true in the regular world, in the days that we had prior to COVID-19. And online learning can really work, can be wonderful in an environment, in a place where you can be in that space where you have your own device. Oftentimes equity issues are exacerbated here because not all students are live in-person. Students are going to using computer labs or other spaces on campus. So that's even more present in this situation. And then as you think about the things actually that Jane was talking about, the extra attention that is necessary in these particular days, but also in general in the online space for online education. There is a lot going on, and we're all dealing with the mental health and well-being of what's happening in this COVID environment. But if you even go back further to the idea of online education, I'm going to use my brother as an example, and he knows I do this. So my brother has been a student in an online environment at an online university trying to get his bachelor's degree. And for many years, he was doing well. He was taking a few classes at a time. And when my father passed away, before he was taking these classes, he was a 4.0. He was on the dean's list for the university, the online university. And when my father passed away, all of a sudden he was failing the 3 classes that he was taking, and not one individual at the institution reached out to help him think through what's the next step. And he tried to reach out and say, these are the things that are going on. But as you think about those triage teams, those BIT teams that happen in current traditional campus bricks and mortar experiences, those are the types of things that, as we think about both the response in the pandemic world, as well as the response and return in the online learning education world, that need to be commingled and thought about as we prepare for student services to be really robust. And we're not all prepared to do that. So those equity issues, those connections, my brother and I are both first generation college students, and so he doesn't necessarily know how to navigate that world either. And so as we all think about that, those are some additional support services that need to be added to the process.
Dave, I'd like to jump in. I think one of the things that is really important for us, and I know we're all across the systems thinking about how we can look at our current policies and procedures to make sure they have the flexibility we need under these really difficult times. But our students who are mostly first gen, high Pell, military, single moms, all of those groups that are very, very high risk, we're making sure that when we have a situation where a student finds they have to drop, maybe they personally have COVID-19, or we're getting those calls now, maybe a member of their family that they're having to take care of. All sorts of situations are cropping up where we really need to, from a student affairs perspective and also a policy perspective, make sure that we've got the flexibility, but also the care. So if a student borrowed financial aid, we really want to make sure that we're looking at that whole scenario for that student. What could the potential impact be? Is there a return of Title IV funds issue that could come up? What kind of adjustments do we need to make to our current policies and procedures so that we have the flexibility during this time to adequately support our students as we all kind of walk through this together?
That's a great.
If I could add just one more quick thing, one of the things that's concerned me about all this from the academic affairs side is the extent to which our faculty are prepared to be on the front lines of some of this, right? So right now, they're the only ones that these students have regular contact with. You know, they're not walking down the halls of our student affairs buildings and seeing all the support services available to them. You know, what are we doing to start mobilizing faculty around spotting some of these issues, understanding what's going on, and helping, you know, to mobilize these online student affairs teams to support the student needs.
That's a great point. And Allie, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to bring in Allie because I know that, you know, often student affairs and academic affairs get different levels of prioritization within the institution. And I'm wondering your thoughts on, during this crisis, is the issue of remote student support getting as much attention as remote teaching and learning? And if not, what advice might you have for administrators on how to better arm their student affairs professionals?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough question, specifically because so many different institutions operate differently. And right now, you know, depending on the types of students, are they fully online, residential, part online, part in person? That may impact things. Also, whether or not the institution has a standalone student affairs unit for online education. So what I will say is that it is exciting to see some of the examples of ways that institutions have been innovative. I did a Twitter search and things I saw were happy hours just like this via Zoom where students could connect. I saw virtual student organization meetings and even elections that occurred where the organizations actually quickly changed their bylaws to allow for things to occur so that they could continue with business as much as usual And this is historic for many of these organizations. I even saw a residence life office that encouraged students to show a photo of their home away from home, which they referred to as their Animal Crossing island, for students who are playing Animal Crossing right now. So you might think that residence life might not have ways to engage with students that are not physically on campus, but I would say that there are some very clear examples that say that that is not the case. So I guess what I would highlight when I think about advice for administrators is twofold. One, like many have said already, these are not normal times. And so my research is on student affairs and online education, and there's tons of good research out there for longevity of this and creating student affairs offices, offering support in normal times. These are not normal times. So that means that you might want to create opportunities for students to engage, but students may not have the capacity or the interest in engaging right now because they might have very real things going on in their lives that warrant their time and attention. Another recommendation would be to troubleshoot both for your students and for the people that are creating these activities. Research shows that self-efficacy is quite low when people begin using technology for online education, and that can actually prevent them from stepping out of the box and trying new things and that comfort. The next one is be realistic. It doesn't need to be anything amazing. In my program, we decided one day just to try a happy hour. We created an announcement, quickly posted it online. It did not take a lot of intentionality or time, and we had 30 students attend. And it was super exciting, and we keep doing it because it worked well. It was not, I come from a student affairs background. When I used to plan in the past, I took a lot more time to plan events than I did that one, but it worked out well. I would add, just when you're trying, be open to the fact that you might not get attendance, and that's not a reflection on you. I do office hours often where it is myself and my lunch at the computer, and that's okay. And I also do office hours where there's tons of students around. Along those same lines, I would encourage thinking outside of the box in terms of business as usual and when we operate our business. So, my students are more interested in meeting at night, or right now, when I ask students when they want to meet, the weekends are a time that they are more interested as well, because they have that time and they're not working on their jobs if they are remote or on schoolwork. And then I think the other thing I would add there is, think longer term. So I'm pretty passionate about online education and the effect that student affairs can have for a lot of reasons. But as this illuminates, online student affairs and services doesn't just affect online students, but it gives us an ability to reach others who, maybe are commuting or maybe are at home and don't have the ability to engage with the university community in the same ways all the time. So if something works, try it again. Think about ways that you could build this into your repertoire of things that you offer going forward when we're not in a pandemic. And then I think the last thing I would say, which I'm very much feeling for my students and my colleagues, is think about what your colleagues can handle right now. Some of your colleagues may very much be experiencing some job insecurity. They may be dealing with things at home as well. And it may be challenging for them to get excited and to create these opportunities the same way that it might also for students to engage. So, having those honest conversations, being clear about what your expectations are, recognizing again that business may not be as usual for students, but also for our colleagues in student affairs would be ultimately how I would start the conversation and the advice that I would give to administrators as we're transitioning in this moment.
Excellent. Thank you, Allie. And I know that Jane and Saskia, you had some thoughts on this as well. I just wanted to share for those who aren't monitoring the chat, we're getting some great ideas about virtual pet shows and coffee breaks and all kinds of things. So be sure to check that out. But Saskia, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, I wanted to follow up on Allie's comments. I think especially during this time when so many of our students, as well as our faculty and staff, are completely overloaded, we're just kind of getting down to the basics. Human connection, the most important thing right now that, and it's something that we feel is very, very important. Our staff and faculty have a very close relationship with our students. We've set that up very intentionally, and it may be just a short phone call, text message conversation, or Zoom session, but just to check in. How are you doing? Those basic principles of student affairs in terms of feeling welcome and in terms of someone feeling like they belong to the organization and that there's someone out there who really cares about them and is supporting their ultimate success and goal to get that degree, I think they apply here. But I think, for us, with our students who work full-time, Many of them have been furloughed. Our Walmart students are really oversubscribed. They're trying to teach their children a whole host of other things that each of our panelists have discussed. For us, it's just, let's get to the basics. Let's make sure we do regular check-ins with our students, make sure we do check-ins with each other, with the staff and the faculty, to make sure they're supported, because we really don't have a sense of how long this is going to last, and we've got to be in it for the long haul.
That's a great point. Jane?
Great, so I segue for me too, Sasha, thank you. The student employees at our university, as well as I'm sure at many of your institutions as well, rely on their funds to support their education. So whether it's the work-study program or departmental student employment, or also we have a unique program, Learn, Earn, Advantage program for our first year and second year students. We wanted a way to sustain those jobs throughout the rest of the semester. And in some cases, it wouldn't necessarily be realistic based on what their original assignments had been. So we asked the rest of the campus to help us brainstorm what they might be able to accomplish from home. And in some cases where there wasn't a transferable opportunity, we created the concept of students going to LinkedIn Learning, that used to be lynda.com, and ask them to investigate different modules and create some learning outcomes of sorts that they could show what they learned. And also the part I like so much about it is that they now know where to go to be able to learn skills if they're ever presented challenges in their new positions. So just wanted to put that one on the table for anyone who's trying to figure out how to keep your student employees employed the rest of the semester.
It's a great one. And MJ, I'd love to turn to you for a moment. Obviously, your daily work focuses on innovation and online learning, and I'm wondering, are there insights from helping others move their teaching and learning online that could be applied to student affairs in a remote world?
So that's tough because student affairs covers so much, right? You know, so you were talking about everything from some of the counseling services we've discussed here to career counseling and, you know, career fairs that have had to move to virtual spaces. So, you know, I think obviously to piggyback on much of what my colleagues here have already suggested, maybe I can make it a little more concrete in terms of the technologies themselves. So, you know, the messaging that we're giving to faculty is to think hard about using a mix of synchronous and asynchronous tools. So, you know, synchronous being what we're doing here right now, but the recording being the asynchronous part, so that others who may or may not be able to access the real live recording can do so later. We do that because, you know, and I think many of the things we've seen in the chat, you know, the virtual pet show, we've been doing virtual happy hours with my family. You know, just that connection is so important, but we also want to be flexible and provide the asynchronous opportunities too. And of course, there are lots of ways, great tools out there for doing these kinds of recordings and, you know, providing this kind of information in an asynchronous fashion. You know, the other thing that was striking me as my colleagues were talking, and kind of going back to my old educational psychology research, is this whole idea of cognitive load. So, you know, right now we're stressed, we're anxious, we're dealing with new tools, we're dealing with a new environment. My dog's running around in the background. There's only just so much I can do at one time. So keeping it as simple as possible, thinking in terms of shorter meetings, more targeted, you know, highly focused on a particular objective, get in, get out, I think is going to be a lot more effective, at least until people start to get a lot more comfortable with this environment. And then of course the stay in touch piece that my colleagues have already articulated so well. But I think in terms of practical application, I would add, you know, being just pedantically clear about expectations, about click here, go there, you know, providing people with that step-by-step, almost recipe kind of direction through some of these things that we're asking them to do, I think is going to be really helpful in reducing that cognitive load, reducing the anxiety of being in this new environment, and feeling like, you know, we're all pulling in the same direction.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to, before we go to other questions, I want to get at some of the questions that have popped up in our chat. So the first one came up at the top of the hour. So I think it was for Saskia. There was a question around how many students are actually attending the open office hours and things like that that you're hosting?
We have probably half of our campus hosting office hours, and it varies from, it might be 10 to 50, it varies. And they try to host that a couple of times a week. Different campuses are experimenting with the modalities. I think that's one of the themes that we have here is that, don't try to get too rigid in terms of your approach. So we're just trying to find out what students are needing during that time. Do they just need that connectivity? Are there specific questions that they need answered? Do they just want that support so they can dialogue about a particular course or objective? So we're trying to be flexible, but it's well received, especially for those students that are used to, coming to the campus and having that interaction. The one other point I wanted to make to MJ's comments, the students that we had involuntarily moved over to the full virtual learning have really stressed how much they appreciate having the synchronous session in their instruction, because again, it's more similar to what they experience when they are on ground. They like the flexibility of both, but for them that was even more important.
I'd like to piggyback off of that, and specifically, I think, so I work with true online students, only taking online classes for the most part. And right now, the students that are transitioning into this remote experience might already have connections to peers and classmates that they've interacted with throughout the year. But if this continues into the summer, we might experience students that don't have that connection to the institution yet, that are looking to make those connections. I teach master's students, and my master's students are, again, all online. And I find that when I offer office hours and clearly state, this is for all of my students, if you want to meet your classmates, many more students attend than if it's to meet me. They do not come to office hours to interact with me, although that makes me sad. They come to get to know each other. And typically when they show up and there aren't classmates, the response is like, oh, I have to meet with you, or it's here to meet my peers. So, just making sure your messaging is really clear there is helpful as well, because I really do think that that is often why the students, at least in my program, are attending office hours. It's to create that sense of community that they don't yet have at the institution.
Just real quickly to piggyback on that, Dave, I think most of my colleagues on the line probably are aware that the largest growing population of online students recently has been students taking online classes from 50 miles away from their institution. I think that indicates this, we make this assumption that online students aren't interested in that social connection, and I think it's really a mistake. I think they are taking these classes nearby a regional institution because they want that social connection. They want to be able to go to campus. So I think it's going to be really important for us to continue this kind of work along with the asynchronous part.
So I think I'd also add to it the point you made earlier, MJ, about the planfulness that can happen both for our current situation, but also for traditional online student affairs, that we all on campus in what is a traditional bricks and mortar school have been focused on learning outcomes and making sure that we have assessments for our experiences, and that should be the norm that would be happening for online student activities and student learning, because it's not just about learning in the classroom, whether it be virtual or in the physical classroom. It's about learning, period. I think in our paper we talked about how an online learner is not a identity, it is a modality, it is a way that we are learning today. So as we think about the intentionality in developing learning outcomes and thinking about the outcomes that we want to have for these students, this is the world that we live in. This is the new norm, and it's not going to go back to what it was previously before COVID-19. We are going to have to thoroughly think about what are those steps for student affairs, and how do we intentionally collaborate with our academic affairs colleagues to make sure this is seamless, from the student support services that faculty could be helping in partnership with, to the academic learning that student affairs always does partner with in what would be a quote unquote traditional campus.
And I would also piggyback off of that and say, taking a step away from our current situation, research on online education shows that most students attend institutions within a specific geographic area that they live, that students, if you go online and Google how many colleges exist where you can take classes online, there are so many options out there. Students are picking specific institutions because they're excited to attend those institutions, because they want to be a part of specific programs, which has implications for us in terms of, connection, our alumni base, so many different things as well. So taking that time to really take a step back and to create those connections to that community and to the institution itself, you might be surprised by how many students that are online students are going to be excited and invested in it. I have students all the time who study from all over the globe and beyond the United States, and they come to University Park. They want to see the campus. They come to graduation. They're excited to be Penn Staters. And that's something that, beyond what we're dealing with right now, we have this tremendous opportunity to continue to really leverage our connections with our students, whether they are online only or hybrid or residential with 1 or 2 online classes.
One of the pieces I'd love to tap is our advancement folks to think exactly about what you said, Allie, the willingness and the interest in being a student from X university. It doesn't matter whether you're next door or you're across the world, you have the opportunity to be a graduate of whatever institution. And that's a great opportunity to leverage advancement, and whether to be academic programs or to student affairs, et cetera.
That's a great point. I had a question. It actually builds on that. Maybe Jane, I'll start with you, because I know ODU has very close coordination between the traditional campus and your online programs, close coordination between enrollment, student affairs. So can you dive in a little bit more around is this crisis helping to forge closer coordination across your campus? And is that something that you think will persist beyond the immediate need?
Great question, Dave. Coordinating with the online entities and the on-campus groups is always beneficial, because you never know who your audience will be. If you think about the marketing and the ways that you might typically market to the online student, you also know that that student may be the parent of a traditional student. So you want to make sure that the messages are received by all parties to recognize that you have on campus as well as traditional, the online options available. And then as far as the services are concerned, it's always an interesting conversation about who owns a student and whether it's appropriate to send certain messages to a student if they're going to be online versus on campus. And I always urge in the combined effort, so that a student knows what the breadth of a university can offer, and they know that they're an online student or not, and whether a message might appeal to them or not. So I think part of the challenge is the communication planning, and who is the authority for the messaging that goes on, and also your overall institutional branding and messaging that's shared is challenging in our situation.
And then I saw another question just pop up in the chat a bit ago. As a graduate assistant, I've noticed that most of the communication from the university is for undergraduates or full-time employees, as are most of the typical support functions, online events, telework policies, etc. What are institutions doing to support their graduate student assistants now, especially TAs that are teaching online? I don't know if anyone wants to jump in and take that one.
I know that lots of student affairs folks are really trying to help their specifically for graduate students in student affairs programs, are still engaging them in their daily activities to help them navigate through this experience as a soon-to-be professional in this world. So some of this is continuing on with practicums and other coursework that they'll continue to do to help them navigate that system, and also continuing their aid packages. So I think that's some of the pieces that they continue to work with, but I'm unsure. I don't have answers around the other TAs that are in undergraduate or graduate classes.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of information about this, except for that our new chancellor for the system actually is the former president for UMB, which is where our medical law schools are, all the professional schools. And he's very clear about the fact that the graduate students also need to leave campus, that they're not going to be used as, as emergency support staff, that they are included in the umbrella of our concern about student safety. And that, we feel very strongly about the fact that they shouldn't be put in harm's way in order to continue to provide services on campuses or anything along those lines. In terms of support for the TAs, they would fall under the same support that's coming out of our teaching and learning centers for faculty. But I appreciate the question because I have not asked it directly of our institutions and will do so. So thank you, Kimberly, for that question. I will check into that a little further.
And I would add, and this is not official advice, but this is if I were talking to my grad students, what I would say to them, if you are a grad student and you are experiencing difficulty through this, you are a student first. And so make sure you're communicating with your faculty if you need support, or, the different resources available on campus, from mental health resources to trainings. You are entitled to those the same way that any other student is as well. So if you're not getting what you need from the university, or if there are things that might benefit you as well, tap into that student side, because you absolutely deserve support through all of this.
Excellent. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit and maybe look beyond the next couple of weeks. I realize that's hard to do, but I know a lot of us are very much focused on dealing with the urgent issues. Some of us are starting to lift our heads a little bit, think about maybe what's going to happen this summer, maybe happen this fall. So I'd love to just get a sense for, although we don't know when higher ed will return to normal, what are some of the aspects of contingency planning that you're starting to put in place as you look forward beyond the immediate crisis?
I'll jump in real quickly to piggyback on something Saskia said earlier about the policy changes that we're having to make. So the system just made the commitment to the community colleges that we were going to start accepting pass-fail grades from transfer students. We are ourselves implementing policies that are allowing more of our students to make their pass-fail decisions right up until the end of the semester. While all of that has been absolutely necessary in order to address this immediate crisis and address our students' needs, I do worry later on down the road about the extent to which this will do our students a certain amount of disservice as well, in terms of their preparation for the next level of courses and so on and so forth. So one of the things that's really on my mind after I get past my anxiety around retention and enrollments for the fall and so forth, I'm really starting to think about how do we make sure that, and pertinent to this conversation, that the student support services are in place in order to ensure our students' ability to continue to succeed in their coursework, as we've had to create a lot more of this flexibility in our existing policies.
Dave, I can take a couple of the points about looking forward. In recruitment, we have to be very agile about how this entering class might consider a campus visit. And the virtual campus tours are popular right now. And even the more comprehensive online experiences that can mimic what a tour might bring you, information about academic areas as well as student support, what the campus looks like, testimonials from our students. That is absolutely key right now to ensure that we can continue to recruit the class of 2020. And as you think of that group and the traditional needs that they have for attending a summer orientation, we are offering an orientation date for someone to sign up for, with the idea that we will either offer it virtually to that family on that given day, or we will flip it into an in-person experience for them as soon as we possibly can. And I think looking even further down the line, we have to have the ability to flip it back as well. And I think we've learned very well from our quick planning that it's possible, and we have to be ready to do that. If we consider some of the options that people are having about, or universities are having about graduations and events that are really important to celebrate leadership achievements and so forth, we have to have that flexibility again to be able to engage new students as well as continuing students. Our summer school program that's coming up soon, we're going to announce very shortly that it will be fully online, so that if anyone has trepidations about whether they can or can't go to summer school, they will be convinced that it will be possible either way. And I think that seems to be the motto that we're coming up with. Whatever way we can deliver, whether it's online or in person, for classroom experience, engagement, and recruitment initiatives and so forth.
I'd go back to the idea of this intentionality around online orientation and other pieces, because online orientation is actually not a new phenomenon. We've been doing online orientation, I know, since when I was working in admissions years ago. And so I think it's really just about thinking through what are the pieces that you want to show the most salient parts of your institution to be able to connect your students with that experience, the right people in the right virtual room to be able to show that student support and the clear connections to their academic progress that they can make at the institution. So that's something important.
For us, we're looking at making sure we know that a lot of our students are impacted. And one of the key things that we're focused on is really making sure that we're a partner in our students' ability to achieve that dream they had to change their lives, which is getting that degree, which is going to improve their social mobility, improve their community, impact their family. So retention is top of mind for us. And we're capturing all the reasons, the risk factors in Salesforce when we have conversations with our students. If they decide they have to stop out for a period of time, possibly due to illness or just complete overload, a variety of different reasons. And we have specific strategies that we're developing to make sure we can re-engage those students and support them to come back and complete their degree, because that's what we're here for.
The other thing I'm curious about in terms of future planning, I know we're at Inside Track, we're hearing an increased demand around certain student services that are already in place but need to be expanded greatly. A couple examples are ability to support students who are in crisis, expanding career coaching, career counseling, because the job market's changing so rapidly. Obviously, being able to better support students online. What are some of the services that you all already have in place that you think you'll be expanding greatly over the course of the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
I am not the person to answer this question because I'm a faculty member, but I am going to jump in and say that right now I teach in a student affairs higher education program. And so students are thinking about what's going on in terms of their own futures very seriously. And so one thing that I do is I build in things into my class that are student affairs related. So for example, my students do use career services, the World Campus, our online career services unit, in what it is that they do. And at NASPA, I've also presented with students virtually with them on a Zoom background myself. So I would say, we talked about the separation between academic affairs and student affairs, but there might be a natural opportunity to partner with academic affairs and to encourage faculty to, as assignments or as part of their lessons or their own personal orientations, if their programs have orientations, to make those connections for students, because I would venture to guess that my students are receiving much more communication from me as their faculty member than they are from anybody else at the university. I also serve as their advisor. So making those connections might help to further some of those different opportunities that the student affairs units are working on expanding.
Yeah, and I'm in the same boat, not in a great position to answer your direct question, Dave, but, and particularly given that I do sit on our vice president for student affairs calls. Frankly, they're just thrilled to have finally gotten all the students' things out of the dorms in the last day or two, just in advance of the governor's announcement that we are now completely locked down. So, you know, I think they haven't even really had a chance to come up for air yet. But I agree with Allie that, you know, where I'm seeing really huge opportunities, I'm hopeful that this will help break down some more of the silos between academic and student affairs. You know, our faculty ought to be much more engaged in conversations about career planning right from the beginning. And this is something we've been working on quite a bit out of the Kerwin Center, you know, working with the institutions to think about how faculty can support career planning, how faculty can support other kinds of what has typically been student affairs sorts of activities, and working together in order to be that conduit, you know, and making sure that the faculty, as I said before, who are on the front lines on the day-to-day communications are helping to support the important work that student affairs does.
I know
David,
some.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
At Brandman, we have a lot of services that have already been transitioned and have been built from the beginning to be virtual. But one of the things I wanted to call out that really works well for us to have other individuals consider is we have a dual advising model where our academic advisors are have a strong relationship with the student and meet with them on a regular basis. They stay with that student through their entire degree program, and they work on the more mundane aspects, if you would consider it that, which is, you know, what is my ed plan going to look like? I have a petition question, those type of things. And when we talk about career or am I in the right major? What does it look and feel like to be someone who's going into marketing versus, let's say, finance? Then we have our faculty partners that take those parts of the conversation, so they work in tandem. And it's a model that's very, very effective, and it really brings academic affairs and student affairs very close together because we collaborate on making sure that that student really gets the information they need. Again, we're serving adult students, so they don't have a lot of time to make mistakes in terms of career choices. And having that academic, most of our academic faculty, they're adjuncts, so they're professionals in the field, so they can give them authentic advice about what it's like on a daily basis to be in marketing or in a particular discipline. And we find that's very helpful, and our students really appreciate that.
I'm actually going to jump in with one more statement. For anybody who has learned student development theory, I think a lot about Aston. And so you think about the identities of your individuals before you think, or while you think about how they interact with the environments for the outcomes that it is that we're hoping students achieve. And so one thing that is important to remember is the fact that, you know, our students are different. And so online students, the average age is very different than a residential student average age might be. So that might impact some of the services or the opportunities that you advance. The other thing along with that is just thinking about what engagement means. So if you study engagement or involvement, there's all this research that shows that it's important for students to join clubs and organizations. But is that true for online education? That's something that I think student affairs units really need to talk about and think about. What are their goals? What is it that they want as their outcome for students to get? And then that will hopefully drive what it is that they recommend. But I would say right now, kind of going back to the faculty side of things, you've got this really good opportunity because many people, myself not so much because I do teach online all the time, but we're thrown into remote learning and quickly have to make these transitions. Well, I'm pretty sure that if a faculty member received a message of, hey, can I come guest speak to your online class today? I'll take one lesson from you. I'll talk about career services or student affairs. I think most faculty right now might be willing and very excited to relieve some of that stress of having to teach that extra class. So even as we think about the future without the coronavirus affecting our campuses, we might be able to take incremental steps right now that might put us in a better place when we do transition back to a more normal situation with our education.
Excellent. And I think for time purposes, we're going to have to leave it there. But I do want to thank MJ, Allie, Saskia, Jane, Stephanie, Jake and Mallory and the whole NASPA team for rolling with it when we had some technical difficulties. And thank you all for joining us. And I'm sure you'll get news soon about where the recording will be posted and all of that good stuff. So stay tuned. But thank you, everybody, for joining us.